Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Gott sei uns gnädig und barmherzig, which translates to, may God be merciful and compassionate for us. This melody is the German Magnificat, and it's a relatively short chorale, only 2 phrases long, but we have some very interesting harmonic choices and form going on here as well. So we're just going to hop right into the analysis. This shouldn't take too long. 3 sharps in the key signature. We start on F sharp minor and we end on F sharp major. So seemingly it feels like the overall tonality of this chorale is F sharp, but I think we start in the key of A, and the first phrase here is a bit interesting in comparison to the second phrase regarding the way that I hear the harmony and how it's impacted my analysis. So I do think because we start in the key of A, we start off on 6, and then we get G sharp, B, E, and E, which is E major over G sharp, that's 5-6, and that takes us right to A major, which is our tonic triad, A, C sharp, E, and C sharp. Fairly straightforward introductory progression. Here's where it gets a little bit off the rails. We have a section here with E sharps going across the phrase. I would be inclined to believe that we modulated to the key of F sharp minor, if anything, just for a moment here, but it doesn't really sound to me like we've moved to the key of F sharp. I'm pretty convinced that we stay in the key of A here, just because that's just how it sounds to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's how the phrase resolves, but to me it sounds like we're in the key of F sharp, and this is in contrast to how I hear it in the second phrase, which sounds much more clearly in the key of E major and modulates during this point. But I'm not 100% certain about that. It just sounds like A major throughout with sort of an extended tonicization. I don't think we've quite breached into the realm of F sharp minor as a key change here. That's just my opinion though, but like I said, I'm not 100% on it. I think that there are 2 different outlooks. So the way that I have it analyzed is G sharp, B, E sharp, and C sharp is C sharp 7 over G, which is 5-6-5 of 6, because C sharp's the dominant of F sharp, and F sharp is our 6. That then takes us to 6, F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp. And so it resolves the way we would expect. And then we get a similar chord on the other end. And apologies, this is not 5-6-5, this is 5-4-3, because it's over this G sharp here in the bass, not over E sharp. But we get it over E sharp here, but this is just 5-6-5 because we've gotten rid of the B flat by this point. So 5-6 of 6, E sharp, G sharp, G sharp, and C sharp here. Now if you were to analyze this in the key of F sharp, which from a symmetrical standpoint, if you were drawing a comparison between these 2 phrases, and it really does feel like there is symmetry going on between these 2 phrases, we would have moved to the key of F sharp. This would be 3, this would just be 5-4-3, this would be 1. This is a pretty standard progression for Bach when we see a 3 chord functioning as a predominant, 3 going to 5-4-3 specifically, and then we go to 5-6, and then we get a deceptive progression where we go to F sharp, A, F sharp, right? The lower 3 voices are hinting at F sharp minor, but the melody has a D in it, which instead of making this an F sharp minor chord, makes it a D major chord, which in the key of F sharp would be 6, and in the key of A major would be 4-6. So it's a secondary deceptive progression or just a primary deceptive progression, depending on how you analyze what's going on here. So all in all, I think both outlooks are accurate. It really just depends on how you hear the melody and just your relationship with the chords. If you feel like the supporting chords shift the context that the melody has, or the context, I guess, that's trying to be conveyed by the melody, then saying we're in the key of F sharp here is totally valid. I'm almost convincing myself that we're in the key of F sharp minor here, if not just for a moment. But for me, it just feels like this C sharp wants to resolve down to A the entire time, and that's really what guides my ear when I'm listening to these sort of chorales. and when there is a disagreement between what the harmony below is trying to convey and what the melody has been doing primarily. So all in all, I think they're both accurate outlooks. I don't need to talk about it much more than that. But after 4-6, we go to G sharp, B, E, and D, which is E7 over G sharp. That's 5-6-5. By this point, we are in the key of A major. I would say that this beat right here would be the point that we modulated back to the key of A major if we had departed to F sharp minor, like this secondary analysis is conveying. And then we go to A major, or seemingly A major, A, B, E, and C sharp, which is, I'm calling it our tonic triad, even though there's a suspension going on here. And in typical Bach fashion, what ends up happening is the bass changes when we get the resolution to the suspension, so it turns from 1 into 6, F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp, 6 chord. And this just is used as a turnaround to point us in the direction of our cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A major. We have D, we have A, F sharp, and B here, which is B minor 7 over D. That's 2-6-5. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. We then move to E major, E, G sharp, E, and B. That is our 5 chord. E major, so 2-6-5 going to 5, perhaps the most common cadence in all of Bach, or the chorales at least, and then we cadence on A major, A, E, and A. This is kind of an interesting cadence because we have no third in this chord, and it is an open fifth, and I speculate this has to do with sort of the sort of like the fact that this melody comes from not antiquity, that's kind of too old, but the fact that this melody has history prior to I guess the tonal era, and Bach is cadencing on this perfect fifth, maybe to maintain the purity of the interval, or perhaps this first cadence is strongly associated with the perfect fifth. I don't know too much about the history of this particular melody or cadences in the Lutheran tradition predating Bach, but when we see open fifths in Bach, we do see them from time to time. I wonder if it has to do just with like the sacred nature of the melody. I don't know though. But that being said, we do cadence on an open fifth. I'm going to hedge my bets and say that this is an implied A major chord since we are in the key of A major, but who knows, maybe Bach would have replaced one of these 3 A's with a C natural instead of a C sharp. It would be very uncharacteristic, but when we don't have the third, we don't know for certain. Okay, next phrase takes us out in the key of F sharp minor, but we start off in the key of A, and I make the argument that we modulate to the key of E here, which is kind of antithetical to the first phrase, but I'll talk about my thought process after the fact. But I think we end with a plagal cadence here. I'm interpreting the cadence a little bit more literally, but I think there's also an argument to be made that this is a perfect authentic cadence as well. There's some ambiguity. We'll talk about it when we get to it. But to start things off, we start off in the key of A major again with A, E, and C sharp. I'm rewriting 1 here. This is something that I bring up in videos where the same Roman numeral crosses over to the new system. This is just a stylistic thing because when there's a page break, I don't... It just helps create continuity between the change of systems. If this 1 was consistent across 2 beats or 2 measures on the same system or in the same part of the page, I wouldn't rewrite the Roman numeral. But when we're breaking lines, I do reiterate the Roman numeral. Passing tone in the bass here, and then we have C sharp, A, E, and E, which is just taking our A major chord and putting it in first inversion. No need to reiterate the Roman numeral here because it is the same. We have another passing tone in the bass here before we go to E major, E, G sharp, E, and B, which is our 5 chord. And it really sounds like we're going to the key of E major here. This is, I mean, like I said, my analyses are guided by my ear, so when I listen, I'm like, did a modulation happen, or is this just an extended tonicization like we saw here in the first phrase? I think there's an argument for both, right? Because yes, there could be symmetry between the two phrases because of what's happening, and I do think there is still symmetry between the two phrases, but just because of the pitches that are being used here and the resolution of what happens here in this second measure of the phrase has an impact on the overall quality of the sound, even though the same general thing is sort of happening here in the bass where we have E, it gets tonicized and then resolved at the end of it. Here we don't get a second resolution to F sharp minor. It's just there's a lot of quick movement. The most harmonic activity in this chorale is happening in this second measure here. All the voices are moving in the same rhythmic sequence, and it feels like F sharp minor gets brushed through a bit, and then we just get a resolution to D major, which takes us very elegantly back into A. It's almost like we didn't quite stop in F sharp minorville, but we did pass by and slowed the car down and took a photo of one of the one of the local attractions while we were moving. But here in the key of E major, or I guess A transitioning to E major, it feels like this B wants to resolve up to E major after this point, despite also serving as a conduit to the key of F sharp minor after the fact. So we have E major again here, where we get some vocal rotation. We have B, we have G sharp, and we have B again, so we don't need to reiterate the Roman numeral. We then have D sharp, A, F sharp, and B, which is B7 over D sharp. That would be 5-6-5 in the key of E major. And then we cadence on E here. Or I guess it would be the end of like a somewhat cadential progression where a dominant goes to a tonic. But on beat 2, we don't, or sorry, beat 4. It's like I was breaking the phrase into two halves, because it really does feel like the harmonic rhythm is on 1 and 3 in this chorale, just because of the nature of the melody. But 5-6-5 resolves to 1, our tonic triad. And interestingly, I do think this serves as our conduit to F sharp minor, because we have this stark contrast of E major going to B minor here, which is something that could happen in the key of A major, right? E major could go to B minor. It does exist in the key of A major, but this D natural on the other side of E major does create contrast, and if we split it down the middle, E sort of serves as our pivot. And even though modulating using the flat 7 is something that Bach does from time to time, I would say it's one of the lesser common scale degrees that Bach uses to modulate. But this chorale kind of brushes up against the sort of old world harmonic style, where we're seeing some I guess, what's the best word? Some reference to maybe some modal ideas as well, just in terms of what's happening here in the second phrase, and definitely what we hear in the cadence as well. But after 7, we go to D, B, F sharp, and F sharp with this passing tone here in the melody. So this is B minor over D, which is 4-6, some transitive harmony here, which creates a kind of an interesting chord progression. Like I said, it really is this E that's serving as a pivot from, it's like a gateway from the world of E major or A major with E major influence into F sharp minor, and then we hear the D natural with the B's and the F sharps on the next beat, which definitely creates an interesting contrast. But 4-6 is going to lead into C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is F sharp minor over C sharp. That's 1-6-4, and typically in a cadential situation we would expect to see 5 afterwards, which we do. C sharp, B natural, F sharp, and G sharp, where this F sharp is a 4-3 suspension over the bass, and this E sharp resolves to a 5-7 chord basically, or resolves and the chord is fully contextualized as a 5-7 chord. We could put the bracket underneath it as well for those who are used to that sort of thing. And then that resolves to a major tonic triad, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and F sharp. Major tonic triad. It's kind of interesting how we leap up to E natural here of all tones. I think it's an interesting gesture where it sort of turns the F sharp, maybe into, you know what? I didn't notice this the first time. I thought this was an F before, but it is a 7th. I think this is dipping kind of low into the bass's range. I've seen Bach cadence, I think, 2 C's below middle C, so down here in the nether region of the bass clef. But the fact that he leaps up a 7th here at the end, and it's not E sharp going to F sharp or anything like that, makes me feel like this F sharp might actually be functioning as 5 of 4 or a major tonic. It's kind of interesting in that regard. But what makes me feel like this is relevant is because this is a plagal cadence, or at least I hear it as a plagal cadence, and 5 of 4 resolves to our pre-tonic chord, D, B, D, and F sharp. So another 4/6 chord, B, B, D, and F sharp briefly turns it into root position, and then we cadence on F major after this double suspension going on here. F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and that held F sharp for 8 beats. There's our tonic triad. So it's interesting how Bach uses this E natural right here to perhaps allude to more cadential material following the original statement of the tonic, right? We see this idea of the tonic being repurposed as 5 of 4 from time to time, and in minor keys it doesn't make too much of an impact, or it's not as interesting really as it is in major keys, because major keys, the chord still stays the same quality, right? It's a major chord turning into a major chord. In minor keys, it's more obvious because the minor chord would need to turn into a major chord because our tonic is a minor chord by default. But at the end of a chorale, we typically expect our minor triad, our tonic triad, to be major quality. So what ends up happening here is that that expectation is then subverted, not by the fact that it's a minor chord turning to a major chord, but the fact that that major chord is then turned into a dominant 7th via this E here. It's really fascinating. I don't think we've seen that before in any particular cadence. 5 of 4 turning into 4, turning into 1. It might have happened once or twice actually, as I'm just like quickly flipping through some of the more noteworthy points in the chorales, but I've looked at like more than 300 now, and it's getting harder and harder to remember minute details, but things that have happened a couple of times. I feel like maybe a plagal cadence like this has happened once in the past. Twice max, but this is something that's relatively uncommon and really cool, a speaking point that I didn't plan on mentioning because it wasn't in my notes. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this chorale. The big takeaways are the open 5th here. The secondary deceptive progression is pretty interesting. If you analyze this in F sharp minor, this isn't really a talking point because it's just a deceptive progression, and those are relatively common. The idea of this right here at the end, the tonic turning into 5/4, is an interesting thing, where the resolution turns directly into the dominant of 4, that then in turn turns back into a way to resolve to the tonic. The fact that there is tonal ambiguity at all. Are we in A major here, or are we in F sharp minor? Are we in A major here, or are we in E major? I think all in all, both and all permutations of both combinations of these, the different possibilities are valid in terms of the way that you could approach and look at this particular chorale. And the fact that, well, if you do look at these as modulations, there are mid-phrase modulations where you start or you modulate to a key during the phrase that you do not end the phrase in. So in this case, we start in A, we modulate to E, but we end in F sharp minor. This modulation to E is a mid-phrase modulation. But yeah, a short chorale with a lot of talking points. That's pretty interesting. Also, this possibility for ambiguity here at the end of the chorale regarding how you look at the cadence. Is this ending part a coda, or is this the true cadence? To me, I sort of hear this ending bit as the cadence, but my relationship with the music really changes from chorale to chorale, and then I infuse some of my preconceived notions in there, but I try to approach each chorale with a fresh outlook in terms of how I hear it, and that sort of guides where I hear particular tonalities and particular sonic combinations, like the difference between these two phrases and whatnot. But regardless, that's all I really had to talk about in today's chorale. I hope the analysis was helpful. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can hit the notification icon, and you could also like the video if you enjoyed the content. That helps me out a ton. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so as well. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.